You did say it right. My maiden name would have been easier. It's Katie Sullivan, actually. And thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I do have to say that I was so blessed to have the Sisters of Notre Dame and then the Jesuits at Boston College. It's a pleasure to be here today. I want to thank the Pioneer Institute. I think the research is phenomenal. I think we've all learned a tremendous amount. I'm sure you guys are, sorry sisters, psyched not to be in school right now on a Monday morning hanging out with us. But I've learned a tremendous amount, and I do believe that this should just be the beginning of a conversation. I think the research is phenomenal, but we have to channel Father John Foley, who, what does he say? Hear an idea and figure out how to put it into action. And so it's with great pleasure that I introduce the panelists this morning to hear from their perspectives. We are very fortunate to have Ambassador Flynn with us today, who from his perspective is going to share and talk about how Catholic education in the city of Boston and around the world is critical to the fiber, I think, of all urban centers. We're also blessed to hear from GR, who, if anyone has not read his book, should pick it up. It is inspirational. It can ignite a conversation around the critical importance of supporting communities and children to allow them to be productive citizens and support all of us in the community. And I'm going to hear from Kathy Mears, who we are so blessed to have Kathy as the Boston Catholic School Superintendent. We, at the risk of embarrassing Kathy, have not had such extraordinary leadership in decades. And so to be able to hear from her today, from her perspective locally, nationally, as a former classroom teacher, to talk about how we can expand and evolve the Cristo Rey model into potentially vocational Catholic schools and other areas as we think about how to expand Catholic opportunities for all kids in Boston. And then we're going to hear from Lisa, who I think will be an extraordinary addition to hear from the student perspective and to talk about how this model allowed her to be successful and to get her graduate's degree, or begin to get her graduate's degree at Boston College. So I thank you so much for allowing me to moderate this panel and to begin to ignite a conversation. We are in a state of urgency, Tom, with all due respect. I don't think we're in a trying time. I think we're in a state of urgency. So if we believe that Catholic education has a place in our community, we've got to stand up and do something now. We are losing generations of kids. We've gone from 9 million to 2 million students, right? We've gone from closed 1,200 schools since 1990. This book is of inspiration. I think, we are going to hear from Lisa, who will provide extraordinary inspiration. We have extraordinary leadership at our school level. Now is the time to act. So again, I'm going to ask you all to channel Father John Foley and to think about what we do when we leave this room and how we talk to our friends and family about supporting models like Cristo Rey, but supporting all kids and granting an opportunity to the best education possible, even in the state of Massachusetts. We have a lot of work to do, and we shouldn't be fooling ourselves, frankly. And so together, we need to unite as a community. And so I'd like to welcome all the panelists today and hear from their different perspectives around what we can do, what they've done, and what we can do as a community together. So thanks again, and I'm going to ask Jeff, was it holy boldness? Is that? Holy boldness. I have never heard that before, and so I use a lot of interesting word phrases. I think I'll replace that today with holy boldness. And so if Ambassador Flynn, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to kick it off with you and ask you to talk about, I just spoke really briefly about how we've closed 1,300 schools. since 1990. And that there's that in the urban reform landscape. So from your perspective as city councilor and mayor and ambassador to the Holy See, can you talk a little bit about how important Catholic schools are to the community, and do you have ideas or thoughts about how we begin to reverse these enrollment trends?
Good morning, everybody. Is it working? No, it's not working. 1, 2. Yeah, this is working. Yeah. Good morning. Thank you very much to the Pioneer Institute for inviting us here today, and all of you for joining us. Good question. I guess I have 2 points of view on that. One, and it's very important that we look at it objectively. One, the schools, presently the Catholic schools, do a phenomenal job, I believe. And I spend quite a bit of time. Matter of fact, just Friday, I spent 3 hours, my wife and I, over to Catholic Memorial in West Roxbury. We spoke to a number of young people. I spoke for longest period of time, had lunch, and so we had an extraordinary day. So I think I have a pretty good pulse, not just recently, but my 40-some-odd years in Boston and international politics. That's the good side. The bad side is I've seen so many great kids not given the opportunity to get a good Catholic education, get turned away. And the reason for it is their parents, and these are my basic core constituency, and it always has been. Their parents can't afford the high cost, the tuitions. And it's really sad to see that. You know, these are kids with great potential. You know darn well they'd get a good education, and yet at the same time we're turning them away. I think it's a sad, sad, sad commentary on our society, on our city, on all of us, for allowing this to happen. Why is it happening? Because we don't have any political influence anymore across this country that we once had. Tommy Birmingham talking about the anti-tuition amendment that we all worked hard for. Why is that so? How can that possibly happen? You're denying poor kids an opportunity to get a good education? Is that what the politicians are telling us? And yet they get away with it? They get elected and re-elected by you. You contribute to them, not just you individually, but society. We honor them at Catholic schools. We give them honorary doctorate degrees. We herald their activities. And then they go up to the Congress and up to the State House, and they vote against poor kids. Let's get on to it, folks. We need to become more politically active, become more of a voice that we once had in society and government today. Then we need to have that voice once again. That's what I see in a nutshell. The schools are doing well, the Catholic schools. Too many kids getting turned away. It's a tragedy. Let me end with one little story, because I appreciated listening to George Weigel. The other day when I was at Catholic Memorial, I told also a little story about John Paul II. I first met him in 1969, September of 1969. He was, I think, auxiliary bishop of Krakow. Well, when I went up to him, he was here in Boston. I grew up in the Polish neighborhood of Boston. When I was introduced to him by then Bishop Cushing, who I was his newspaper boy, so Bishop Cushing knew me very well. selling newspapers and delivering newspapers to his house. He introduced me to Father Wojtyła. This is Ray Flynn. He's a very famous athlete. And I just graduated from college and played some professional basketball. And it didn't resonate with Father Wojtyła. But he made some comment that, oh, okay, you know, I played goalie on his soccer team in Wadowice. He then, there was an awkward pause, and Cardinal Cushing said to him, Bishop Cushing said, he studied under Dominican fathers at Providence College. With that, Father Wojtyła said, what did you study? I said, I studied economics. I said, my favorite course was papal encyclicals. The greatest inspiration in my life, politically, is studying Rerum Novarum, the famous encyclical of Leo XIII. I went on, I was just ready to start explaining it to him. He says that's the first article that he ever wrote about Rerum Novarum. We both carried on this conversation for 5 minutes. There was a line from here all the way down to Park Station. So I didn't want to take all the time. With that, he said, what did you learn from Rerum Novarum? I said, I learned about fairness. I learned about justice, economic hope, giving people, working men and women, fairness in the workforce, a decent wage, safe sanitary conditions. The reason why I was so interested in that is because my father was a dock worker. Tommy's uncle was too, with Tommy's uncle. And he ended up in the hospital because of the unsanitary conditions where he worked. He was in the hospital for 5 years. Kathy's father lost his leg. A ton of steel came down on his leg. So this isn't something that we read about in books. This is something that we experienced. I'll end by saying, when I was at Catholic Memorial the other day, the kids started asking me about encyclicals, and we carried on this conversation about Rerum Novarum. Now, what better training for kids to learn about justice and about treating people, all people, with respect and dignity than they're learning right over there at Catholic Memorial High School? We need more programs, more education for not the kids that are there, because they're learning. I'm talking about all the kids that are walking the streets that can't go to these schools because they can't get a Catholic education because these schools, so many schools are closing. Last year we tried to keep Elizabeth Ann Seton School, all minority girls over in Dorchester. It closes. A tragedy. A tragedy. Think about, let me end by saying, think about all those opportunities. We're such a society that is compassionate, cares about people in working families, and yet we're closing these schools. It's a tragedy, my friends. We got to do something about it. Thank you.
Okay, on that upbeat note. Well, Kathy, I'll go to you. And I want to reiterate, I agree with you 100%. I think it is a tragedy. I think it's a disgrace. We honor our politicians who really, frankly, haven't stepped up, and many of them are graduates, actually, ironically, and put their kids there. Funny. Hypocrisy. This is probably my last time ever here again, so I'm going to get it all out now. And I feel like BJ would be proud of me, right? So, Kathy, pardon? Yeah, I know. See, they did teach me well, and my husband was a knight, so go see him. Kathy, I have a question, building off of that, because we do know that in a state like Massachusetts, getting any type of scholarship or school choice-ish thing passed is like next to impossible. Talk to us about how do we take what we've learned at Cristo Rey and expand it to other vocational models, right? Medical arts models, nursing, whatever you imagine or you can envision, and talk to us about that. And then how could we, as in the audience, philanthropists, corporate sponsors, funders, local politicians, anybody, how could we then help you support and execute on that idea?
Okay, I will do it. By the way, she's asking questions not on the list. Just so we're clear.
It was my again, first and last time.
Yeah. So no, it's okay. It's a good question. So we in Catholic education believe that our children are more than just economic beings. They're here to do more than just get a job. However, as a parent who wrote all those tuition checks to Catholic institutions, I want them to be employable when they're finished. I want them to study the encyclicals. I want them to understand the truth and beauty that God has created. I also want them to be able to be employed when they're done. So how can we do that? There are models across the country. Cristo Rey is one. Another is like a medical arts high school. And we could do that in Catholic education. I actually think we are uniquely poised to do that in Catholic education. And it would work similar, that the students would go to high school for part of the day or 4 days a week. We can work that out. And the other day they would study medical arts. And for children of less economic means, if they could graduate from high school with a certificate to draw blood, to do whatever kind of medical thing that they wanted to do, that's a ticket to college. Because then they can work for a hospital they'll pay for them to go to college. And that would be great. And we should be able to do that in our world in Boston. Where's more medicine being studied than in Boston? So we should be able to do this in partnership with people like you who care about young people, and with Catholic hospitals or other hospitals. I know Catholic hospitals in Boston anymore, I forgot. But with hospitals across the state, because they need a workforce, and our students need to learn how to care for others. There's nothing more Catholic than that. The internship idea that's done in Cristo Rey should be done in other Catholic high schools. Kids need experiences. When I interview people many times that this will be their first job, and they have a PhD, but they've never held a job. And that's so weird to me, because one of my questions that I ask is, tell me about the worst job you've ever had, because I think it's important that you know what kind of jobs you don't like. And when it's your first job and you're 29 years old, that's odd to me. And I think kids need to be exposed to workforce before they're 29. I think, you may not like it all the time when you're working. You are learning things. If you learn what you don't like, it's just as important when you learn what you do like. So that's a good thing. And I think that we can build on these. These are models that are being done in other Catholic schools across the country. And I say, why not in Boston? And we just need your help. If you want to give me your name, we'll be in touch, because we want to do these things. The Cardinal said to me, Ambassador, he said to me last spring, he said, I want to open something. And I said, I am so with you, Cardinal. So we're working on it. We're going to make it happen.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. That's great. So, GR, can you share with us, I want you to talk about, so the internship program obviously is critical to the success of Cristo Rey, but more critical is the courage and the commitment of folks like you, right? If you hadn't stepped up and brought some friends along to start the volunteer program there, talk about what it actually takes to make this school viable, and then the commitment and tenacity it takes, and the patient urgency of which that you will get there to be successful to change kids' lives.
Okay, great. This is working, right? Yep. So before talking about what any of the proverbial adults involved with the model might contribute to it, I'd start with the students. So those of you who are here, because your question is ultimately like, what's making it work, right? How many of you asked your parents about, hey, there's this school, can we look into it? Or how many of you, so raise your hand if you guys brought it up, or, so let's do that first. Anybody? So was it, I guess my question is, raise your hand if it was your idea, or if it, and then we'll do if it was mom or dad's idea. Okay, and then there's no right answer. They're both right. But then how many of you was it mom or dad's idea? So I mean I would flip the question a little bit and say, I think a big part of why it's working is, for whatever the intrinsic motivation is, wherever it's coming from for these guys, and sometimes I think it's their parents, and it'd be interesting to study the ones that aren't able to make it through the 4 years. If it was mom and dad that were pushing more, if it was the students. But I think hopefully it's working most of the time. So for you guys, great job. But I think that's where so much of it's coming from, is people who are saying, I want to do this. That ultimately is what's making it work. I would say too, in all that time I worked on the book, I remember thinking this was a story, it really never should have worked. There were so many tailwinds, and there were so many people that showed up right at the right time. In one, for the young people here, one little brief history lesson. So before LeBron, there was this guy named Michael Jordan. So I'm from Chicago, and in talking about people, the right people kept coming into the Cristo Rey model at the right time. So there's a story I love from the book where when Jeff came to Chicago from Boston, he didn't know anybody, and he was in a fundraising role, which is usually you're networked wonderfully into the community, and you can go knock on the right doors and get somebody to write you a check for oodles of money, and then everybody else falls in line. And so the board told Jeff said, well, we're going to raise, I don't remember what it was, X dollars, and it was an enormous amount of money for a new building. And the board said, oh, hang on, you're not even from here. You don't know, this'll never work. And I think you did like 2 times your goal or something like that. It was by any objective measure an enormous success. And so when I was interviewing people for the book, one of these guys said, we didn't know at the time we'd hired the Michael Jordan of fundraising. And I think there was this element with Cristo Rey where for me, and it was interesting to hear George's talk this morning, because I'd always felt like, yeah, it's just amazing. The right people showed up at the right time, and they were people who, and this was in the paper that you guys have put together, people that had lots of choices. They could have gone, a lot of them were coming from corporate America. They certainly could have gone to corporate America. They were leaving jobs where they made more money, and they were drawn to this. So in terms of why it's working, I think that, and I'd never thought of it in the context of Mind the Gap or back to John Paul II, but that charism that animates a lot of the church today, I think probably comes from there, and there's an element of it with the Jesuits too. So I don't know if I've fully answered the question, but I think Cristo Rey's benefited from having the right people who want to do this with you guys primarily, and then some of the right people who have kind of stumbled into, I think, animated by a desire to do something more.
No, I think that's great. And I've known Jeff for a really long time, and I didn't know he was a Michael Jordan of fundraising, although I've written him many checks. And so I appreciate that. And I think it would be great now if we could hear from Lisa. Can you build off of that perspective from a student's perspective, and how did you decide to go to Cristo Rey yourself in Boston, or were you encouraged by a family member? And then what it's meant to you.
Is this working? Yeah, great. So it was more intrinsic for me as well. I had went to an elementary school in Mattapan, and a lot of people actually encouraged me not to go to what was North Cambridge Catholic at the time, because I was coming out of high school with pretty great grades, and they felt that I could go to like an Elizabeth Seton or et cetera instead. And I don't know why, there was just something in me that was really attracted to the model. The ability to work and also gain an education was really what I was looking for at the time, even though I was like 14 and I really didn't know what I wanted, but I knew that was definitely something that attracted me to the school. So I would say that is true, and my parents, as soon as I mentioned that this was what I wanted, were right on board. So it was nice to get that support from home as well.
That's great. So Kathy, how do you envision potentially scaling an internship model? So in a city like Boston, what would it look like, and how can we be supportive of that?
So we would like to invite more of our Catholic schools to look at an internship model. Most of them talk about, but we haven't been able to get it moving forward and get it done. It could be a senior year, or it could be an internship each year during a child's high school, and that I would leave up to the school. But we need to work on our corporate partnerships, and through the Catholic Schools Foundation, Lynch Foundation, we have real opportunity to do this. People like Rick are already on board to work with the schools, and we need to just develop that further and ramp up the internship model, because I really believe all students would benefit from it. I don't want to take anything away from Boston Cristo Rey, because what you're doing is phenomenal, and you're making a true difference. But remember that you are inspiring others to look at internships, so thank you for that.
Great, thanks. I don't know if I'm allowed to can I open it up to audience questions now? I don't know was Jamie horrified? Is that okay? Okay, good. Okay, good stuff. Does anyone have any questions for any of our 4 panelists? No? Great.
Is there anything in the Cristo Rey model that emphasizes or at least opens up the door to vocation?
Yes, I know that there are Cristo Rey students from Boston who work in the pastoral center and have those opportunities to work with priests and sisters. So absolutely, and just having the sisters run one of the schools also helps raise lots of awareness of vocation. So yes, those pathways are formed.
Great, yes, please.
I'm wondering if there is any example of a Catholic school, historic school, working in partnership with a public school, the regular schools. I'm very concerned, as a former educator, in schools, that instead of bringing people together, creating lots of models, just fragment everything. So, and particularly when we're all looking for the same funding, basically. Whether it comes from a company or whether it comes from private sources, it's all the same money. So, I would love to see more partnerships between the Catholic schools. I'm very impressed by having heard it really explained so well for the first time today. So, bottom line, are there any examples of partnerships, because people may not have heard me, partnerships between Catholic schools, Cristo Rey schools in particular, obviously, since that's what you're experts in, and public schools that could be models for the future?
Great, thank you.
I don't know of any offhand, but I do know that, like in Boston, we are part of the Boston Compacts, which means that we work with the public and charter schools to try to raise education in Boston. And the Archdiocese of Boston would be open to working with anyone who wants to make education better for children. That, the church realizes there are a lot of Catholic children in public schools, there's a lot of non-Catholic children in Catholic schools, and we're here about raising the standards for everybody and educating everybody. Education is about a relationship. We do it well because we build relationships, and we think we have things to share, and we have things that we could learn from other partners. So we are very open to that.
Thank you. That's a
And
great answer.
Jeff, do you want to answer that, or?
Yeah, just make one comment. In a couple, I don't remember what year it was, but the Lynch Foundation funded a partnership with Cristo Rey Boston High School, Boston Collegiate Charter School, and the Jeremiah Burke. And we worked together on professional development when the Commonwealth was starting to move to the Common Core standards. And so we designed, I think it was math and language and
ELA,
social studies,
yeah.
ELA, and with social studies. So our teachers got together, and then because they're all small schools, and so the 9th grade teachers from all those schools got together, and they worked on common assessments that we gave to the students, and then we used that data collectively. We shared that data and talked about how we can improve the questions and improve the quality of instruction. So there's a model for that happening. in Dorchester that work really well.
Yeah, we do. I should say that this is Lynch Foundation. We are agnostic. We're all God's children. We support high quality schools. We don't care what kind it is in the city of Boston. We encourage tri-sector work. We believe deeply that it doesn't matter what school your child is in. And frankly, in the city of Boston, most parents choose multiple options for their children. And to Kathy's point, as primary caregivers and educators are the kids' families. And so we want to support them wherever they can be served. Yes, standing up. Oh.
Public schools and how we integrate public schools with Cristo Rey. I'm new to Cristo Rey, and I'm delighted to be there. I thought that we were a pipeline from the elementary schools to our high school, and the answer is no. In fact, because of our income requirements, less than 10% of our kids come from Catholic grammar schools, middle schools, because we set the limit. At our school in Massachusetts, the family has to earn, or if the family earns more than 75% of the average family income, they don't qualify for our school. Our families, on average, earn $21,000 a year. So they can't afford our school. So if they did go to a Catholic grammar school, middle school, it's likely they paid for that. They don't qualify. So we are the first time that these students will experience a Catholic education. So we're very proud of what we're doing at Cristo Rey.
Thanks, Kevin. That's great. Sure. Do you want to just...
Hi, I work in advancement for Nativity Prep Boston. We're a tuition-free Jesuit middle school here in Boston. A lot of access for a lot of students who are coming through a little earlier in their education. Something we've experienced, and I'm sure a lot of Catholic school fundraisers here will recognize, branding is key, and academic excellence is key to our brand. But Mr. Weigel also talked about, a lesson from John Paul II, our lives are a gift for others. And I'm curious why in our branding, we found it very effective at Nativity Prep. Why aren't we talking more about this education forming men and women for others? And really our academic excellence is key, but we also bring this special sauce, and another phrase we heard earlier, our education and our students that are coming out of these schools are giving back to their communities and really transforming their urban communities. So I just want to ask you, how can we better integrate that into our branding? I think this report's outstanding, but it really talks all about academic excellence. How are we working to bring in this other form of messaging?
We are working on that as we speak. We are working with a company right now to make sure that people do know that. Our tagline for the Archdiocese of Boston is developing saints and scholars. So right there, I think we're trying to tell you that the saint part, giving back to others, raising people who know of Christ is key to what we do, but we're also raising scholars, people who have the academics. And we're trying to find the balance so that people know what we're doing. And it is a balance. It's not one without the other. We cannot be academically excellent if we ignore the relationship and the relationship specifically with God. So we're trying to find that balance. And it's interesting to me that you haven't heard enough about that. So that tells us that we still have work to do in that area. But I think definitely, and I think maybe you could speak to that, because at Boston College you're getting the other dose of Jesuit there about being a woman for others.
Yeah, no, I would say that I actually went to Boston College as an undergrad as well, so I'll be a double eagle in May. But I think that idea of being a woman for others kind of started at Cristo Rey. We do and talk a lot about how we can serve our community. First and foremost, the community that we have in the school, and then afterwards looking at our outside community. So whether that be community service, whether that be in the classroom, et cetera. So I would definitely say that is something that may not be as transparent on advertising, et cetera, but it is something that we know and partners know for sure.
Great. Yes.
I have a question for the ambassador on your point about the political inactivity of Catholics in pressing for support. How do you explain the fact that the hierarchy has overseen this terrible demise of Catholic education that has been mentioned once or twice. And do you see any activity on the part of the hierarchy to arouse us politically to press for vouchers or some sort of financial solution to the education problem?
I guess I grew up in an environment where I saw the Catholic Church in the hierarchy, nuns and priests, voice taken very seriously in the political arena. I recall attending 8 o'clock Mass on Sunday mornings. The priest would talk about some topical issue of concern to the public, whether it be the death penalty or it would be war or it be social and economic justice or whatever. And people would go outside the church. They would be talking about that. My mother and father would be talking about that after Mass, over dinner on Sunday. Everybody was abuzz with what the priest had to say, what we learned in school, what the Pope had to say. And it had an impact. It had a powerful impact. Do we understand why the country is moving in the direction it is? Do you think it's just something in the air? Or is it something that's taking place in our politics, in our media, in the influences that connect with people? And so what do? Just accept that and we just say that, well, that's the way it is. We're heading down a slippery slope, my friends, and we've got to do something about it. Now, I know that people will say to me, and they do all the time, we have to keep politics, we have to keep religion out of politics. Well, these issues that we're talking about, they're not necessarily political issues, Democratic issues, or Republican issues, or liberal, or conservative. These are moral issues. And they happen to fall into the purview of politics. But so what? Why should we be intimidated by that? Why should these people back us off in expressing our point of view about what we believe and what we think is best for our country? Everybody's got to speak out, and they've got to be more involved, more active. When I ran for mayor of Boston, 78% of the people of the city came out to vote. 78% of the people came out to vote. Not just the other day, but recently, 14% of the people came out to vote for election for mayor of Boston. Where are all these people? Where are the Catholics? Where are the people who feel like you and I do? Where is their voice? Where is the organization? My father used to go to a union meeting. There were 400 people there. He'd go to the Holy Name meeting at Gate of Heaven. There'd be 300 people. I don't even know if we have a Holy Name Society anymore. We're talking about closing schools. We don't even have a local church organization. We have to get involved, not only for our faith, but for our country. Because it was good people who built this country, who made this country special. And unfortunately, too many people are sitting on the sidelines now.
Wow. That's right. That's shocking. 78% down to 14%.
Yeah.
That is disgraceful. I should have opened up the questions, and I apologize. Our panelists have done a phenomenal job, but without the research, we wouldn't be here today. And so if anyone has any questions for George or for Jeff, please feel free to ask those questions as well. And so does anyone have additional questions? Sure.
Yeah, I was very captivated by this program because I actually hadn't heard about it before. And I'm like, I live in Salem. I sat on the board of an elementary school that was closed.
St.
6
Joe's.
Catholic parishes are now 2.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, Lynn, Salem, this is like the place, so I get all excited, whatever. And then I hear about the pressure points, the headwinds here in the state. So I'm actually curious as to what is being thought about for expansion in the state of Massachusetts. Not just other high school programs, but in Massachusetts.
Catholic?
Cristo Rey.
Oh,
So I think that's for you.
So, yeah, okay. Well, I'm sorry that you say your Catholic school closed up in Salem. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, well, there you go. Yeah. Well, so the way the program works is we begin with a feasibility study and we look for communities that can support the work-study program, because you've got to, you know, for every 3 or 4 companies you call on, you might get one job. Lots of people, not everyone's like Rick and says, yeah, sure, I'll take 4 kids and they'll work and I'll have my staff supervise them. And there's an expense to it too. You've got to pay $30-something thousand. Thank you, Rick. It's an easy sell once they meet the kids. So first of all, you've got to do a feasibility study. You've got to make sure there are enough young people who are from low-income families. You've got to make sure there are enough work-study jobs, and you've got to make sure there's enough support, economic support, beyond the work-study program. So in smaller communities like Salem, Lynn, that's very hard to do. We were able to get a school in Lawrence, but I think under the standards the National Cristo Rey Network has now, we wouldn't be able to establish a school in a metropolitan area that small. It's got to be larger metropolitan areas like Boston, Detroit, Chicago. Work study, but the jobs. You got to find the jobs, yeah. The jobs have got to be there. That's the limitation. Well, the goal is 400. The average school probably has about 350. Yeah, something like that's the average school. Yeah.
go ahead, Kara.
Okay.
You had mentioned attrition, and I'm wondering how the network is thinking about addressing attrition, which I know you're trying to do. And I'm also wondering, can I get 2 questions? Sorry, Katie.
Yeah.
Kathy, to what extent are you thinking about the same things as you seek to expand internship programs possibly in other Catholic schools? How are you thinking about potential impacts on enrollment as well as potential impacts on attrition? I don't know if you see the work-study program as a factor in attrition.
Well, so attrition is if you've been to a Cristo Rey Network meeting over the past 15 years, that we talk about all the time. So there's a couple of ways to look at attrition. One way to solve the attrition problem is to be more rigorous in who we allow into the school, right? We can just say, unless your attendance is perfect in middle school, unless your grades are great, you can't get in. That would be a very small group of people. But those of us who are educators and care about kids are like, well, let's give them a shot. Let's give them a chance to try to make it through the school. Let's give them all the support, or her all the support that they possibly can get, and let's see if we can get them through the school. So part of the attrition problem is just our own goodness and our own willingness, and back to that holy boldness that the Jesuits talked about. Don't give up on a kid. Give it a shot. Try. So that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that it takes a lot to respond to the needs of a diverse set of learners in a classroom. And when you have a range of students Lisa came into Cristo Rey or North Cambridge Catholic, pretty strong student, and then you have students who come in a grade and a half, 2 grades below level in some cases. That's a broad range of young people to serve. We do our best with that broad range of young people. We try to do a lot for the kids at the lower end of the academic spectrum, and sometimes it's just not there. And then the other thing is that you have the influence of society. The young person I met on the T, on the Red Line, he was 15. He had a tough sophomore year. His buddies were going to Brighton High, that was a school, and he thought, well, that sounds like fun. I'm going to go there. It's easier. He didn't have a lot of parental support. He wasn't doing well academically. We tried to keep him at the school. He ended up transferring. So some of the transfer issue is just adolescence and a family structure that can't always support what we're trying to do at the school. Mm-hmm. We've had this attrition problem from the very beginning. We've had debates about it from the very beginning. And, Sister Mary Alice, Sister Mary Murphy, we've been in all these meetings, and we pray about it a lot. We do more than prayer. Do you want to say something? Yeah. Go ahead. And then we got a principal here from the Christian, then we'll let Kathy answer this. So this is even better. You got a principal.
Thank you. So good morning. My name is Anthony Zavdi, and I'm the principal of Notre Dame Cristo Rey up in Lawrence. And sort of to directly address that question, one thing the network is doing is, this is my 2nd year, by the way, at Notre Dame Cristo Rey, and my 5th year working in some capacity with Notre Dame Cristo Rey. So the network granted us, or there was a competitive grant process, and we are now in the 1st year of a grant that specifically targets student attrition. And just the process of getting a grant in place really got us thinking about why are kids leaving us? Why are, at a small school with a lot of supports, why are most kids leaving? And the answer was for academic issues. Some behavior was really about academic issues. Kids who are coming in below grade level, and we're trying to work with them to get them up to where they need. And one of the great things about what the network is doing now is that each school, I think there are about 8 schools that got grants. It's a plan tailored to each school. So we really looked at a sense of belonging and community, about our curriculum. I looked at a lot at what teachers are doing, what kind of assessments we're giving, what are we really testing kids on, and is that the important stuff? So it was a very, I think, healthy grant process and implementation. And I don't know if we can keep repeating this, but from the beginning of the school year last year to this morning, we've lost 8 kids, and that was it. We lost 9, but 1 moved back a couple weeks ago. So that's big for us. And it's, we have 4 students here. We really try to build a family, and I feel like that's been very helpful too. So thank you. We have 256 kids.
So, Kara, I would say one thing that we have to do as a Catholic school system is make our elementary stronger, because then the students going from Catholic elementary school into Cristo Rey or any of our high schools will be better prepared. And I think we have to really focus on that. And we have to focus on retention at the elementary level too. The other thing is, and I'm big about us accepting more special needs students. Give these kids a chance. They're 14 years old, for God's sakes. Give them a chance. I'll take a lower retention rate because we gave them a chance. I'll do it every time because that's important. But what we also have to understand is, if kids are behind, asking them to catch up in the same amount of time and learn new material without getting behind is crazy. We need to lengthen our school year. And I say that in Boston, and people don't like me for it, but I'm telling you, if we could lengthen our school year, we would help many of these children, because it's not fair to ask them to get caught up and move ahead all at the same time. We would never ask that of adults. And we ask it of 6-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds all the time. It makes no sense to me. So we need to lengthen our school year. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles started it 6 years ago, and they have about 70% of their schools now go 200 days a year. And they are seeing increased rigor, and they are seeing increased retention. So that's one of my goals, is that we keep talking about this. These are difficult things to do, though, because we're a little bit set in our ways. So we have to figure out, yes, this is the right thing to do for children, because I believe it really is.
Great. Okay, George, would you like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, let me just say a couple of things. First, to the question about where is the hierarchy? Forget the hierarchy. Lay Catholics do not need permission of bishops to be active in public life. You got that permission the day you were baptized. Okay? You were baptized to be a missionary disciple, to be a witness for Christ. That includes the public square. You don't need permission. Secondly, for reasons with which we're all painfully familiar, the bishops of the United States today, many of whom I count as close personal friends, simply do not have the throw weight in public life that they have had in the past. This is not the 50s or the 30s or the last hurrah or any of that stuff. We're in a totally different situation. And while it's nice to have the encouragement and support and teaching of our Episcopal leaders, we do not need their permission to get organized and get stuff done. That's point one. Secondly, and this is in a broader context, although I think it bears on some of the questions that I've heard, we need to change the language game on this whole debate about education. We begin with 2.5 strikes against us when the state school system monopolizes the word public. Cristo Rey schools are public schools. They serve the public, they serve the common good, they take care of people of all backgrounds. They are genuinely public in the fullest sense of public. So instead of talking about public schools and private schools, that's the half strike against us. is that rings up elitist, whatever, detached, unengaged. We should be talking about independent schools and state schools. Or if you're a child of the 60s like me, you can talk about regime schools and the people's schools. But we need to change the vocabulary of this argument because it works against us. These Cristo Rey schools, as indeed all the schools of the Archdiocese of Boston, serve a genuinely public function. And we should insist on that time and time and time again. I think that shift at least some of the dynamics in the voucher argument, the charter school argument, all that stuff, begins to shift a bit when it's clear that, what we're doing is for the public good. It's not just for our little private sectarian good. It's for the public good.
That was excellent. Thank you. Where were you like 18 months ago when we had the question 2 issue here?
I've been writing this for 30
Yeah.
years. If I didn't respect the wall here, I'd be banging my head against it.
That's great. Is there additional questions? Anything? Yeah.
Just really practically, so 2 questions really. Do you miss classes to go to work, number 1? And number 2, do you have an extended year for students who are working and going to school?
Let's listen to Mary Alice answer this one.
Yes, actually we have an extended school year, and we also have an extended school day. So our students actually begin classes at 7:30 and we finish classes at 3:30. And then for those that have academic needs beyond what we can take care of during the course of the regular school day, they stay with us until 4:30, 4:45. Our school is actually opened every single day from 6:30 in the morning until 6:45 at night. And we do that because most of our students do not have access to computers at home. So they have time in the morning to come in and use the computers and get homework done, or they can do it at the end of the day. Oh, for jobs, the students work, well, in the Cristo Rey network, our school is one of the few that sends an entire class out every single day. So on Monday, Monday is our rotating day because our student teams are in groups of 4. So on Tuesdays, all of our sophomores are out working. And in the morning, because we are located in Lawrence and we have no public transportation, unfortunately. So as far east as Ipswich, Massachusetts, over to New England Biolabs. And then on Wednesdays, my freshmen go out. On Thursdays, our seniors. And on Fridays, our juniors. And then Monday rotates. So that's where it gets back to what Jeff mentioned earlier, where they're working 5 days a week. A month. But actually, they're all out working. So in truth, we never have a full roster of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors in the school at the same time, other than the first week before we actually send them out to work. So we're always missing 1 class every day.
Thank you so much. On that topic, though, you should really read GR's book because it outlines the story, but it talks about sort of the execution, the implementation, all the dynamics that go into this school structure, and it's incredibly inspirational. And you have to follow 4 kids throughout the story. I was tempted to grab him aside and ask him if he'd be interested in coaching my daughter's sports team because he had such a profound impact on the girls' team. But it's a wonderful book, and I would encourage you all to read it. And the other thing I should mention is at this time in Massachusetts, we really should stand up and pay pay attention more. We do have a mayor who is a Catholic school graduate who was instrumental in getting Cristo Rey Dorchester up and running. Marty has been a champion, and I think given the right support, he can continue to be an extraordinary champion. And our governor has been exceptional with us over the last 3 years. And we have to date more funding in our Catholic schools this year than we have in decades. ESSA has allowed us, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, which was voted in under Obama and is being executed under the current administration, allows far more funding to go to our private public schools. And so I really do encourage much more civic engagement because there is more that we can do and that is available. And so I just want to make sure that we do know that we have 2 extraordinary leaders at the state and local level that are big Catholic school champions. And then if anyone has any additional questions, if not, I'm going to ask each one of our panelists for some closing inspirational remarks. Oh, we do have one. Okay.
Hi, just quickly to ask Lisa for her recollections of the challenges of the work-study academic balance at Cristo Rey.
I'll see if I can remember a few. That's a really good question, though. I think if I can think of my freshman self coming in, I worked at New England Aquarium. That was my first job, which for a lot of people was super fun because I got to be in an aquarium all day. And that it was great, but I didn't yet have the communication skills. There was a lot of like presenting. There was a lot of engaging with people. And like we do have like during the summer, there's an extensive training course that we all went through before going into jobs. But even still, getting thrown in is very different. So that was definitely a challenge. And I think as I like as I went on at Cristo Rey, I became more confident. So then the next 2 years, I worked at Ironshore, which is a insurance company in downtown Boston. And then my final year, I was at Greater Media Boston, which is a radio station. So by the time I got there, I felt a lot more confident. I didn't face as many challenges. I felt like I had a family both in school and actually at work, which was great. And they really are what encouraged me to even think of college as an option and to be where I am today. So I think I had more successes than challenges for sure.
That was great. Yes. Yep.
My name is Elena Zongro, and I'm the Director of Development at Cristo Rey. I think one of the pieces that we haven't talked about is the supervisors at the corporate work study sites. They're so instrumental in the success of our students as well. It's a real partnership. And I think about one company in particular where 2 young men are now juniors, have been there since their freshman year, and they're on the help desk with all clients across the world, not just the country, across the world. They're rebuilding laptops. They are helping people troubleshoot problems they're having, adult professionals in their own work site. And I credit the supervisor at this particular company because he has nurtured these young men in a way that we couldn't at the school. He's giving them skills and confidence in the work site, and that's a critical piece, that partnership we have with our corporate work study partners and having a supervisor in there that believes in the mission of our school as well.
Great. Thank you. Okay, now I'll ask each one of the panelists to quickly, let us begin our Monday with some inspiration and holy boldness. Go ahead, Kathy.
Join us. Please come and join us. We really are doing work for the public good. One of my first meetings with Boston Public Schools, there were 12 people and me at the table, and I asked, how many of you attended Catholic schools? All 12 raised their hand. All 12. That's the impact Catholic education can have and does have in the city of Boston and the Archdiocese as a whole. But we need your assistance. We need your help. We will raise these children to be saints and scholars. We will raise them to be good people who serve one another and give back. But we need your help. It is not something I can do by myself. It's not something I can do even with the great Lynch Foundation at my side or the Catholic Schools Foundation by my side. We need all of you, everybody. It takes a village, and the village is right in this room. So please give us a call and help us, because you will find it to be the most rewarding work of your life.
So 3 thoughts. The first one's probably not terribly inspiring, but one, I would say, obviously recognize the economic realities of operating a Catholic school in a world where you don't have a line out the door of people waiting to become priests and sisters and brothers who are going to function as free labor, and that's an enormous challenge that really gave birth to Cristo Rey. So to obviously don't pretend it's not a reality. As an outsider from Chicago, clearly there are a lot of people in the room who are involved in Cristo Rey already, who are involved in education broadly. So with that as the challenge, my other little Chicago plug, there was a kind of a city visionary, Daniel Burnham, who laid out a lot of the lakefront. Those of you that have visited Chicago, there's a lot of parts of Chicago we're not boasting about currently. The lakefront is still one that everybody's pretty proud of, and Burnham always talked about make no small plans. So I would share his encouragement with everybody that at the time, and from working on the book, I mentioned it before, but I was struck by the audacity of the idea of Cristo Rey. It started with there's a population we ought to serve, and there was a litany of reasons why it shouldn't have worked. Sending 14-year-old students into workplaces, some of whom English was a second language and sort of a distant second language. Some of them who maybe had documentation status that was uncertain. There were legal hurdles. There were practical hurdles. It never should have worked, and it did. And there was a lot of luck and a whole lot of elbow grease. So make no small plans would be my second piece. And third, to echo what you said, I would guess those of you who are here that aren't already involved, if you just want to dip your toes in, I suspect, at least as was my experience, if you show up and say, I'm happy to help however you can use the help, typically there's probably an opportunity that you would find rather enjoyable and would be beneficial for everybody.
So I think for me, one thing that I could leave you with today is that there are many stories like mine at Cristo Rey schools. Like, I come from like a low income, first-gen home. Both parents didn't get a chance to go to college, and really never thought of college as an option for me. But Cristo Rey is what allowed me to really know that I could not only enter college, but I could succeed. And so I know that like a lot of people who come from backgrounds like my own are really simply just looking for a chance and for somebody to believe in them. And I can like sit up here today and say that I'm going to get my master's in May, and that is very much so because of the teachers, the supervisors that I came in contact with at Cristo Rey. And I can't credit enough of my education and who I am today, because they really are, I think, the core of who I am, and a lot of my values and foundation began at Cristo Rey. And I'm actually in contact with many of my teachers and supervisors from my work study. So that's just to show you what can happen even 6 years later. So that's my last tip. Thank you.
Very nice. One last political observation. Of all the years that I've worked with politicians and government and so forth, from the local level to the national level to the international level, I've learned that a program that is very effective and is very worthwhile, if the public doesn't know about it, if you don't generate public support for it, the program will probably dissipate. But if the public is informed, if the public is aware of what this politician stands for, what this policy is about, they will support it. Let me give you one quick last example of why this has had such a profound impact on me, not just from experiencing it politically, but I used to do a national radio show. I still do to some degree. One day I was in Chicago doing the program, And a fella calls up on the radio talk show. I was on for 3 hours every day. And he called up and he says to me, it was after I was ambassador, he says to me, Ambassador Flynn, is there a reason why the United States House of Representatives has never had a Catholic as its chaplain? I said, gee, I said, on radio, I never thought of that. I didn't know that. Of all the years that the House of Representatives has been in focus, in operation, they never had a Catholic chaplain to open up each day the session of Congress. This goes back to the days of George Washington, right? We've had, and the chaplain is appointed by the Speaker of the House. We've had Catholic speakers of the House. And why never a Jewish person? Never a Catholic? Why is that? Well, here's my point. For 3 hours, people called on that radio program. I had 11 lines going into the studio. The lines were lit up all day long. The next morning, I showed up at the studio again in Chicago. The lines were lit up, all asking the same question. You know what? 2-3 weeks later, they appointed a Catholic chaplain, and it wasn't a Catholic Speaker of the House of Representatives. What's my point? My point is this one retired public employee living in the outskirts of Chicago called up, made this one phone call to me, raised this issue. The whole country became mobilized. And the Speaker of the House, yes, I gave them the Speaker of the House private telephone number. but let that go. He appointed a Catholic chaplain. My friends, you know who that one person is? I don't know. It's probably you. Probably a person just like you. Any one of you could have made that phone call. But look what it achieved. You're talking about schools, Catholic schools, giving kids great education, but we don't have enough of them. The tuitions are too high. Too many good kids of all backgrounds can't go to these schools and get that education and serve the public good, like George Weigel said. It's for the public. It's not just for a select group of people. This is an American issue. This isn't a Catholic issue. This is good for our country. Make your voice important, and we'll change things back to the way they were in America once again. Thank you.
Great. So I think just to thank, again, Tom and Rick, Jamie for putting it together, George, Jeff, the research has been fascinating, and all the panelists for sharing their perspectives. Really appreciate you all being here this morning. And thanks so much. Have a great day, and get engaged.